recognized that in a lecture, Morgenthau lecture in New York a couple of years ago. But he said, well, nevertheless, we can take some comfort in the fact that Serbia was planning it anyway. And the proof that they were planning it is, guess what? Operation Horseshoe. A probable intelligence fabrication that was publicized after the bombing. So even if it was true, it wouldn't matter. And furthermore, even if it was true, it was a contingency plan. I mean, look, Israel has contingency plans to drive all the Palestinians out of the West Bank if there's a conflict. Does that mean that Iran has a right to bomb Israel? The U.S. has contingency plans to invade Canada. Okay, does that mean everybody has a right to bomb the United States? I mean, that's the last straw of justification on the part of a respectable person. But for the herd of independent minds, it just doesn't matter. The bombing was because of our high values and our nobility, and it was to stop genocide. If you say anything else, the torrent of vilification and abuse comes. But it's not just on this issue. It's on every issue. So try to bring up the idea. Take, say, the Vietnam War. A lot of time has passed. A huge amount of scholarship, tons of documentation, blew up the country.
I'm sorry, we won't have time for going into that. I want to ask you about some of the present developments that are being used again to fabricate a lot of these issues. Slobodan Milošević died last month. What is the significance of his death in your view?
Milošević was committed many crimes. Not a nice person, terrible person. But the charges against him would never have held up. He was originally indicted on the Kosovo charges. The indictment was issued right in the middle of the bombing, which already nullifies it. They admittedly used British and U.S. intelligence. It was right in the middle of the bombing. Can't possibly take seriously. However, if you look at the indictment, it was for crimes committed after the bombing. There's one exception, Vrachek. Well, let's even grant that the claims are true. Let's put it aside. All right, so there was one exception, no evidence that he was involved or we don't know what took place. But almost the entire indictment was for after the bombing. How are those charges going to stand up unless you put Bill Clinton and Tony Blair on the dock alongside him? All right, then they realized that was a weak case. So they added the early Balkan wars. Okay? A lot of horrible things happened. But the worst crime, the one that they're really going to charge him with genocide, is Srebrenica. There's a little problem with that. Namely, there was an extensive, detailed inquiry into it by the Dutch government, which was the responsible government. There were Dutch forces there. And that's a big, hundreds of pages of inquiry. I mean, their conclusion is that Milošević didn't know anything about it, and that when it was discovered in Belgrade, they were horrified. Well, suppose that had entered into testimony.
Does this mean that you were a Milošević sympathizer?
No, I thought it was terrible. I thought he should have been thrown out. In fact, he probably would have been thrown out in the early 90s if the Albanians had voted. It was pretty close. Yeah, he did all sorts of terrible things, but it wasn't a totalitarian state. I mean, there were elections, there was an opposition, a lot of rotten things everywhere. And I certainly wouldn't want to have dinner with him or talk to him. And yes, he deserves to be tried for crimes, but this trial was never going to hold up if it was even semi-honest. It was a farce. In fact, they were lucky that he died.
In what sense?
Because they didn't have to go through with the trial. Now you can build up an image about how he would have been convicted as another Hitler, and we don't have to do it.
I just want to bring you back to the bombing of RTS. Some have argued that this particular act of NATO's in '99 set precedents for targeting of media by the United States afterward, notably in Afghanistan and Iraq. That is, that it set a precedent for legitimizing media houses and labeling them as propaganda in order to bomb them in U.S. invasions. Do you make any connection there?
Well, I mean, the chronology is correct, but I don't think they need excuses. The point is, you bomb anybody you want to. Let's take 1998, so it's before it. In 1998, here's another thing